become the mind monkeys are like, who am I to write a book? I'm not an author. None of us are born with fears. So the opposite of that is, when did you feel most alive and energized?
Yeah, that's a lot deeper than I was expecting today.
Sorry, that's my job.
Bit of a strange one on today's Engaging Marketeer, because I am interviewing the person who coached me on doing a TEDx talk. It's like I'm interviewing my teacher. So when I did my TEDx University of Chester talk, Cath Williams was the coach for all of the TEDx speakers, because she was also a TEDx speaker herself and is a speaking coach and professional speaker. So I'll be asking Cath about how she got into professional speaking, what happened when she did her TEDx talk some years ago, and what she's doing with her business right now, and what she considers the importance of storytelling within marketing. As you've mentioned, you're obviously very, very big on stories and speech, and how it sells and how people sort of engage with that.
Yes.
What got you into that? How early in your life did you understand that was important?
Well, there's lots of examples, but the one that's just come into my mind, actually, that what a lot of listeners won't know, even if they've ever crossed me before, is that I began as a physiotherapist. And so when I say, the stories that we tell ourselves are so important, the reason for that is I was in an orthopedic ward after I'd graduated, and all the way down one side of the ward were people with knee replacements, and all the way down the other were people with hip replacements. I realized very quickly the reason I only survived as a physiotherapist for 14 months was because what instantly fascinated me was what was going on above the neck. I'd spent 3 years learning all about really what was below the neck. Obviously, brain and the nerves, However, the story that people were telling themselves in those hospital beds could be entirely different one from the next, even though their injury, the operation they'd had of a knee replacement, hip replacement, was the same. And what I realized very quickly is I'm a psychologist really here. The words that I use to motivate people have to match the story that they're telling. So, for example, I would be called, one person would say, oh, here she is, the physio terrorist. Oh, it's going to hurt. Oh, leave me alone. I don't want to do it today. And I'd think, how interesting. They see me as the physio terrorist. Go away. You're going to be, because it was my job about when they were released, not released sounds like prison, but I was the person that signed the discharge. It's the physio, not the consultant. He's done his job, the surgeon.
So you had the power.
Whether you go home or not is down to me. Can you function? Can you walk the distance of the ward? Can you climb stairs? Are you going to be able to get in and out of your car, and all of that? So I thought, you're going to be in an extra 5 days because you're telling yourself that I'm unhelpful to you. Whereas, of course, the other person would be going, yes, what is it you want me to do? So it may sound, as we go on to understanding what I do now, it actually began with that frustration of kind of, mindset is everything. The words that people are using is everything. How are they describing themselves and their situation? How are they describing me?
I love that, the physio terrorist.
Physio terrorist.
And you were keeping them captive from their everyday lives,
Yes.
refusing to release them unless they completed tasks.
Well, yeah, it was powerful.
There's a film in that somewhere. In fact, there already is a film in that.
Oh.
So, where did you go from there then? How did you end up? How did you stop being a physio terrorist?
Well, that goes into the story of the military life. So,
of course,
yes. So, if I kind of tell you a story about, I'm all about building confidence. So, I think what I would like your listeners to know is there was a time when, if you think about that frustrating moment when you're getting in your own way. That you kind of want to do something, but something's holding you back. Or even harder, I think, to watch is seeing the potential in someone else that they don't seem to be able to see in themselves. So a moment that was very real for me. I'd already been a therapist. I went out of the NHS world and into the therapy world. But there was a moment in time when we're going back to 2012. I'm living up in Inverness and I'm standing in the kitchen of an army quarter. And if anyone's ever been in army quarters or knows anything to do with the military, they're all painted the same colour. They're all magnolia. So they're all the same inside, and you're living on what's called a patch. Everybody's either behind the wire or the houses are the same. And I've chosen this life of a military wife because I thought I knew what to expect, but I'm, really not feeling confident. And out of the corner of my eye is a splash of red, and it on the kitchen wall that I've put there. And it's this poster that says, "Keep calm and carry on." And I'm like, who the hell put that there? I am not calm. Because my husband's on the front line in Afghanistan. And I know that any minute of any day, I've got 7 months of 24 hours a day, not knowing if the knock on the door is going to be the army chaplain, the army welfare officer saying he's not coming home. So I was asking myself, what's the difference there? Those that are listening hopefully can relate to this, that there can be situations that people are sharing, but the difference between whether they sort of rise through the ashes or are destroyed by it is quite interesting. So I was already a counsellor, qualified through the army, but I had some fellow military wives kind of self-medicating through this. They literally just took themselves to bed or, just kind of zoned through it somehow, and others that seemed to be thriving. And I thought, I don't know how, personally, I think I'm not sure how to cope with this. So I started kind of interviewing and picking up lots of tips and strategies and thinking, what's the secret to coping with whatever life throws at you? And I was kind of writing all these bits of paper down. And then I realized, well, I'm always writing a book here, And then I thought, gosh, could this be a book? Could this support other people? But then coming to the point of holding ourselves back, of course I got in my own way, as we do. And in come the mind monkeys are like, who am I to write a book? I'm not an author. It wouldn't be good enough. No way. Who do I think I am? Secondly, I just don't have the time. I had 2 small children. They're 5 and 2. I'm living up in the Highlands. I've got enough going on, all the rest of it. I haven't got time to write a book. And, and thirdly, it wouldn't be good enough anyway, whatever I was thinking. Until I saw an interview with Eddie Izzard on the TV. And he was talking about, Eddie Izzard, flamboyant clothing. He was doing the Sports Relief Challenge of 30 marathons in 30 days.
I remember that.
He was being interviewed, do you? Yeah. Mm. And he said he knew that he'd have to get out of his own way, that it would be his mind that would talk him out of completing this challenge far more than his body. Because he knew that if Maasai warriors in Kenya could run marathons every day, then his body could do it as well. So he was talking about the power of the mind, and he said, the mind's job is to keep you safe and alive. So I've got to give it the instructions. I want this. I can achieve this. This is good for me. This is what I want. He knew also that it only works in pictures and words. So he had to kind of see himself crossing every line, see himself taking every step in order for his mind to accept that that was possible. And he knew that the mind doesn't like what's unfamiliar. So if he could make it familiar, he could achieve it. So hopefully you're hearing in that story, that was the story I was telling myself, I can't do this. This is painful. This is unfamiliar to me. I can't be an author because I've never done it before. And when I realized I could use those strategies. So part of what I do now is teach people those rules of the mind. I'm now a clinical hypnotherapist. I didn't know any of this at the time, but that took me on a journey of understanding how, and linking back to the physiotherapist, this story we're telling ourselves is very important to be the leader of your own mind. Otherwise it leads you. So that's how it kind of then took me on a journey. The book came out a year later. I did write that book. It's actually here. Based on the Keep Calm and Carry On poster. So you can see, stay calm and content, no matter what life throws at you. It turned into, that pain turned into a purpose, and it came out. And that then led to a TEDx talk, which led to becoming more of a speaker, which led to me going on just more of a development journey as a therapist and a speaker. And it ultimately brought me here today, really.
It's interesting. One of the things you said there was, I'm not an author. And it's like even J.K. Rowling wasn't an author until she wrote the first book.
Yes. Yeah. And whatever follows I am is that story again. So a lot of the job I do is to sort of say, if you say, I hate running, I'm not a runner, why would you run? Whereas as soon as you literally say, I am a runner, even if you're just like you say, you've never been a runner before, the minute you say I'm a runner, well, a runner's going to run, even if that means, 100 meters slowly. I'm a runner, therefore let's go out and run. Yeah.
And you mentioned the TEDx talk that you did there. What made you want to do that? Because it's a frightening thing to do.
It's very frightening. Well, again, going right back, if I'm honest, I've always known there's a performer in me. Part of my clinical hypnotherapy training is actually going back to kind of happy moments. A lot of what I help people with, well, it's all that I do, is release people from fears. And part of that is identifying what energizes you the most. So coming back to the TEDx in a second, but when I've undergone my own, I take people back to when their fears weren't there. You know, none of us are born with fears. So the opposite of that is, when did you feel most alive and energized? And really strangely, under some of my own like practice therapy sessions, I went back to this strange memory where I was having lipstick put on my nose. And I thought, it's very odd, you know, and I was like, oh, I'm 4 years old, because it's all there in your subconscious, even if you can't consciously remember these things. I was like, okay. And, you know, my colleague is saying, okay, what's happening? I'm like, oh, yeah, the primary school teacher's putting lipstick on my nose. I'm 4. And it's because I'm Rudolph in the Christmas play. And it's always about feelings, what's going in the body. So how are you feeling? And I'm like, absolutely amazing. I feel absolutely energized. Like, I'm going to be the main part. I'm going to stand on the stage and I'm going to love it. So I could tell you a different version of accidentally ended up with a TEDx talk, but the truth is, I knew I belonged on the stage. I just hadn't really had that opportunity. It was, the door wasn't opened for me. It kept being closed in my face. But if I go back to being a 4-year-old, I was like, I love it. That's where I want to be. So I did just take those opportunities and gradually make that familiar. Coming back to, you know, the mind doesn't like what's unfamiliar until you keep making it familiar. So I just said yes and thought, something is telling me I need to take this opportunity, even though I'm not ready, even though there's no coaching at all. I just said yes.
You knew you belonged on the stage. Not you think, not I should have a go. You knew you belonged.
Yes.
I love that. I love that. And did you have to apply for the TEDx talk, or was it a case of you were, I want you to do this?
So it was a phone call one day. A fellow counselling colleague of mine back then, she saw this poster and said, Cath, I think you should be one of the speakers. So I just rang the number she gave me and they said, sure, really. But this is a long time ago, and I know that most TEDx, anyone watching this now that or listening that's done a TEDx would probably be kind of, that's not how it works now.
That's not how it works.
But as we met, didn't we, through the TEDx Chester, and that's part of my story of my coaching on that TEDx event consisted of having a microphone put on me and told where to stand. You know, that was it. So no, there was no audition, there was nothing. I just practiced over and over in my conservatory on my own, turned up, microphone on, stand there. That was it.
And how did you feel not having any training, or was it the fact that you didn't know any different because obviously you hadn't done one before?
Didn't know any different. My husband had picked, he's still in the military, he's an army officer, travels a lot, and he'd picked up a book that said Talk Like TED in an airport lounge. And so, you know, he said, there you go. Gave that a bit of a read, watched some TEDx or TED Talks and thought, yeah, you know, I can do that. Look back now with horror, you know, I'm half proud of it, but obviously I think that's the message, isn't it? That I think, you know, that you'll get through a lot of your videos, hopefully, that, like you said, J.K. Rowling wasn't an author before she was an author. So I'm proud of just going for it. We've all got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So if I did a TEDx now, it would be a lot better, hopefully.
Well, you said you're half proud of it. What of the talk? And I'll put the link in below the video and below the podcast so people can see it. But what about it would you do differently, or were you not happy with?
Just, you can see the nerves, I suppose. You know, the self-doubt. Again, the work that I do now, helping people to release the limiting beliefs. When I watch that, I can see the limiting thoughts and beliefs that are there, that are sort of shown in my shallow breathing, in my, you know, holding myself very stiffly. So I'm proud of the message I'm conveying. I'm proud of doing everything I can in that moment. But the person, I always kind of say, we're born with natural confidence. So I help people to sort of set that free. And you can see that I'm held back by the past. And really that was about, like I said, it was a closed door to me. I was given messages like, I was 15 years old and I thought about going for head girl because you had to sort of put your name in or something. And my form teacher said, Catherine, as I was then, not Cat, Catherine. Oh, I don't know. I think you're a bit shy. I don't think you could do the public speaking. I don't think really you should go for this because the head girl's going to have to speak in assemblies. And that's these little, and then my parents came to watch performances. I'd been in a theatre camp and they came and watched them and I wanted them to see this potential and they were like, oh yeah, lovely dear, right then, let's go home, it's cottage pie for tea. Just no acknowledgement that like, this is my heart and soul I've just put on the stage and you just don't see it. So it was just breaking through all of that stuff that I can see I was still held back by that.
Now you mentioned that, it reminded me of something that happened to me, and I'm wondering why people that have influence over children do this. That my art teacher once told me, don't do art at A-level because you're not good enough. And I did it just to spite him. And I ended up going on to do a diploma in art and getting a distinction, and then doing an arts degree, and I now run a web design agency, have done for the last 14 years. So up yours, Mr. Lawton. Why do people do that, do you think, to kids? Why are they stamping on basically kids' ambitions, kids' dreams?
Well, we make our decision based on just two things, love or fear, like what we care about or what we're afraid of. So in my opinion, well, and I know that when people go back to moments like that, if you went kind of back to that and, kind of on an unconscious level, you would see that the fear of the teacher was driven by their own fear and limiting beliefs. And they were sort of trying to protect you from failing, essentially. So they want to then put you in this protective cage. Well, if I hold you back and tell you that, you're going to fail, then I'm kind of saving you from failing, which is like, no, but that's just screwed up. Don't that just hold you back? Like, why not say, give it a try? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you fail. The most important thing is trying because you care about it. And that's, again, what I love about everything in this world is energy, and you've got to go with what energizes you the most, because at least if you aim for that and land close to it, then you're going to love what you do, hopefully. So that's the thing. I would have loved to join the Royal Ballet. I was an 11-year-old that wrote to the Hammond School in Chester and asked to go. I mean, and again, I'd kind of blocked that out until I do this job now of hitting the therapist. You block these things out. And so it sort of came back to me one day and I was like, good grief, I did. I wrote at 11 years old, what kind of child does that? Well, the child that wants to break out and wants to be on the stage but has no support. And of course, they wrote this lovely letter back going, here's the prospectus and here's our fees. And I'm 11 kind of going, oh, yeah. So you're not going to wave a magic wand then and just say, sure, come on in. We'll help you get to the Royal Ballet School. But my point is that I'm close now to that dream. I can't be on the West End stage. I can't be in the Royal Ballet, but I'm a performer. And I love nothing more now than writing my own script, telling my own story and helping other people to tell their story as they hear mine. What do you want your story to be? What are you being held back by that you want to get rid of?
And going back to the TEDx, when you came up with the idea for the story that you were going to do, obviously TED is very, very clear on what the story needs to be and the impact it needs to have, that it needs to be like a big idea or a new way of thinking. How did you apply what you wanted to do to that? And did you have any concerns that, again, was it worthy?
I can't remember how I came up with the idea. And because I'd had no conversation about that, I was left to my own devices, honestly.
Oh, right. So it's just go for it.
Yeah, no, I knew there was sort of, be engaging, be different, bring something different. But where I went with that, if people do watch it, it's called Toilet Seat Therapy, what to do when you don't know what to do. So the idea came from my knowledge as a therapist and as I've mentioned, the book of Stay Calm and Content no matter what life throws at you. This military life that I've lived in for 20 odd years, the stories of all of the people that are coping with everything you can imagine. I don't think I could be surprised by anyone's story anymore because I've heard pretty much the lot, I reckon. But I know one thing, and that's that sometimes the only place you can be on your own is like in the loo, lock the door, and I was inspired by another story that I might tell you in a minute, but if you have just 5 minutes to yourself, so that was the inspiration of like, sometimes you just need 5 minutes to yourself. What is going on in my life outside of that door? Because the way I walk out and handle that is up to me. So that inspiration was called it toilet seat therapy. And I used the mirror, the floor, the ceiling, the sink to represent kind of strategies, mindset strategies, really questions you can ask yourself, so that when you walk back out of the door, you've kind of processed what's going on and how you're going to handle it. That was it.
Yeah, well, I think we probably all use, without going too graphic, we all use the toilet as a means of escape sometimes.
Well, that was the point. Yeah.
Particularly if you've got kids.
Exactly. And that was, again, the inspiration. My children were little. Yeah. The only lock inside the house is on the toilet door. So run away, lock the door, give me 5 minutes.
Yeah. Although most guys listening to this, 5 minutes, no, 45 minutes minimum.
Yeah, I didn't have 45 minutes in a TEDx. So.
Sadly, no.
I couldn't do the man version of the toilet seat therapy. I had to do the 18 minutes or less version.
Be out in an hour or maybe more, I'm not sure. Depends how long the battery on my phone lasts. You mentioned that there was a story that inspired it.
Yes, I won't get my facts right exactly, but I don't know if you've ever watched snooker.
I watch snooker all the time, yeah.
So you might know better than me, but I do know that it was a chap that was losing something like, how many frames is it in snooker to be the world champion? 20?
In the final, it's 18, I think you need to win in the final.
Well, he was losing something like 3-12. I don't know, a lot. And he said in a BBC, I think, 5 Live interview, they asked him, how did you turn that around? You were losing halfway through, whatever it was. And it just chimed with me, because I think I'd either just recorded the toilet seat therapy or I knew I was building up to it. And he said, well, I kind of popped to the loo, basically. I took 5 minutes, had a word with myself, and came out in a different mindset. And I'm like, that's it. That's it. It made a difference between a world champion or not, So that's what he said.
There's been a lot of snooker world finals where somebody has been ridiculously far ahead and then thrown it all away. And nobody really knows quite how that happens. Jimmy White's done it many times.
Right. Well, they were focusing on the chap that caught up. So, I mean, you're right. Maybe the other guy threw it away. I don't know.
The other guy bottled it, yeah. Not that Jimmy White's a bottler, but famously never won the world title, despite being very, very close many, many times. So once you've done your TEDx, how did that impact your opportunities for speaking and for your business?
I mean, not as much as you might think, I think. I think everything can be part of the puzzle, but or part of the picture, however you would put it, but unless, I think, if I'm honest, I wasn't in the position to maximize that to its full potential, probably because of what I've said, that I was in a kind of invisible cage of my own beliefs. So I didn't use that to its fullest potential. I was kind of, don't watch that. Proud of it, but keep it in the background.
Which you just said today as well, when I said I'll put the link below this. You're like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. So, I've been on my own journey of developing my voice. That's, I have a build confidence program now, and the D of the build is develop your voice. And I am very passionate about helping people to overcome these self-limiting behaviors, really, of, don't put the links there. Still got my own words. But yes, I have built on that step by step, and that inner drive and passion is very much still there, and that's part of the picture that has taken me forward into focusing more on a speaking business. Yeah.
So where are you now with speaking? What kind of work are you doing?
My main area is schools, so I'm very energized by I kind of describe I'm a kind of bookend. So I work a lot with the one-to-one, the sort of the big issues that people will have that can turn into, self-sabotaging behaviors, panic attacks, anxiety. I'm in the mental health field as a rapid transformational therapist. So, but the speaking side is about the prevention. So I want to talk to any audiences as large as possible about building confidence. But obviously the younger the messages, can go in, the better. So I do a lot of work in schools, and hopefully moving forward into more keynote speaking to audiences, all about building confidence and developing your voice and all of that, right? Yeah.
And how do you find school children as an audience? Because they're obviously very different to an adult audience or a business audience. And I imagine, because I remember when I was in school, what I'd be like when a speaker came in, they wouldn't really hold back on the criticism, I'd have thought.
Yes, and obviously that's why I try and keep them engaged. I do activities with them, bring in the storytelling, because you're right, you bought a ticket to be there. They haven't chosen to be in that space at all. So you have to be worthy of their attention, is how I would put it. And that's again why, again, I'll be honest, there was a dream gig for me, I thought at the time, of speaking to a room full of year 10 girls, so 15-year-old girls. And I thought, what can I share that I wish I'd known at 15? But of course, I felt sort of bruised at the end of that, not just because I hadn't made myself worthy enough of their attention. I think I did a good enough job, but that it really is always about wanting to improve and wanting to engage them more, because that was a tough audience. They weren't sort of sitting there going, oh yeah, tell us how to be more confident. It was kind of like, who's this woman? Which is fair enough.
And how do you deal with that when you can see an audience slipping away from what you're saying?
Pivot. So, that took me on the journey of telling better stories. Has to go with emotional engagement. So if I could go back now, and that's why everything that I do now is through the power of stories. So I would now tell them some of the stories of me at their age, and what happens is that they will be telling themselves their own story. That's how our mind works. If I engage them enough in hearing my story, because that's how we've evolved, everything we communicate really is through the power of storytelling, and that's how we learn about each other, the things that stick, and we tell them on and on and on. So the idea would be they would get to sort of know me, and I would be worthy of their attention, and at the same time they will be telling themselves their own story of how mine resonates with them, and that's how I would bring them with me.
And that's not easy to do, is it?
Well, I can tell you a story of that I would tell them, if you want to understand how I would do.
I think that would help, because I've thought about doing school stuff myself, because I remember when I was in school, I still remember now a speaker that came in and talked to us, and basically he was a poet. And I've always remembered him until a few years ago I saw him on TV, and he still looks like he did when I was in school. So the guy has not aged, but it's a guy called Benjamin Zephaniah.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
He was the poet laureate as well.
Yeah.
And he was the coolest guy I've ever seen. In school, I think it was like first year of high school, so I'd have been about 12. And he's walking up and down the assembly stage, swigging from a bottle of water, literally spitting out his poems. And you can see from the light coming in from the windows above, because we had really high windows, and the spit from the water that he's drinking as he's talking. I thought, this guy is just so cool. He is so cool. And then he's like really famous now. He's been in EastEnders. What I realised when I looked him up recently, he was an actor in EastEnders. But that stayed with me for years, right up till now. So maybe 30, 40 years, however old I am. Yeah, 35 years. That stayed with me. And I would love to have that kind of impact on people. But again, I think, I'm not Benjamin Zephaniah. I can't do that. But, I could do me. So, yes, please, how do you tell a story that engages 15-year-olds and gets them to use their own experiences to relate to what you're saying?
Well, let's see. So let me see if I can do a good job of that. So I'm taking you back to around 20, where are we, about 6-7 years ago. We're going back to kind of 2017, something like that. And I'm going on some strength psychology training. And strength psychology is all about what energizes us. And the tutor said, he's called Graham, And he said, let's go around the room and tell you a little bit about yourselves and why you're here. So, Cath, why don't you go first? And Graham looks like a kind of Steve Martin, salt and pepper, grey hair, nice guy, really kind of warm and welcoming. So I said, okay, Graham, well, I'm here because I'm a therapist and I know that not feeling good enough, lacking in confidence is the root cause of so many of my clients' issues. Everything stems from that. We call them protector parts, kind of anxiety, people pleasing, imposter syndrome. They actually stem from this root cause of not feeling good enough. So I'm here on this strength psychology course to have a tool to really help my clients to see that they are enough. And he said, oh, that's all very lovely, Cath, that's great, but why are you here for you? I hadn't been asked that question. I was kind of, God, Graham, you got me there. I'm a mother of two and a military wife and a therapist, and we've just moved house and all. I here for me. Well, if there is a dream that really I'm here to think about for myself, that door closed a long time ago, Graham. And in that moment, I was taken back to being 15 years old because I thought, what is it that I wanted that I've never felt I could have? So we're going back. I'm 15 years old and I'm standing next to a car with my parents. And I've just been on a theatre camp for 5 days and I have loved every second. I have learnt the lines, we've painted the scenery, we've come up with our own creations, we've learned acting skills, dance skills a lot, and I have just loved it, felt so energized. And the final performance, I was playing a 15-year-old blind girl. And as I said, I learned all the lines, left my heart and soul on the stage. But I remember thinking, maybe this will be the performance where my parents will recognize how much this matters to me. Maybe they'll see and support me in this dream. So I'm standing next to the car and I kind of go, did you like it? Was I good? And my mum kind of turns and says, gosh, lovely to these theatre folk, do they have real jobs, do you think? How have they taken all this time off to be doing this with all these kids for a week? Gosh, Brian, did we say cottage pie for tea? I need to get broccoli on the way home. And I was just... So if I was back with those 15-year-old girls, I would then turn to them in that moment and say, have you ever felt you're unseen, kind of unsupported? Have you got a dream that nobody seems to be seeing? A bit like you said with the art teacher that went, don't do art. They didn't, not seen, not understood, not supported. So back in that room with Graham, this is true. I turned to him that day and said, do you know what? I would like to know whether I have what it takes. Strength psychology is about discovering your natural strengths. Could I have what it takes to be a successful speaker and performer? Because I'm not sure I'm ever going to be good enough. That's that belief I picked up in that moment. Because if your parents don't think you're good enough, the belief goes in, I'm not good enough. So out came my top strengths: enthusiasm, creativity, empathy, compassion, flexibility, resilience, and persuasion. They're shared by only 1 in 4.5 million people in the same audience. As I call it, that's your 5% genius. And Graham said to me, Cath, if those aren't the strengths of a kind of potential natural speaker, you bring all of those, you are good enough, you are enough. So the message that would then go on to the 15-year-olds would be, you are 5% genius. Everybody is. We're now going to find your top 7 strengths right now. We're going to do it together, because whatever you want to do, you are enough. If you play to what energizes you, you play to what you already have within you, you can learn the skills, but you can't really be taught your natural strengths. So let's find out what they are. So I hope that would be engaging enough. And the message obviously is, I am now doing, when I tell these stories, I am embodying my 5% genius in order to help you see your 5% genius right now. Let's do it. That's my story.
Wow.
What do you think?
No. I mean, I
hope that'll engage them.
Yeah, I can see that working straight away. Yeah, I think we've all had experiences that you've just described there, where you're expecting some praise for something you've done, and a parent or someone just goes off on something that is just completely irrelevant because that's what they focus on, and it's not what you expected.
It's not about you, but at the age that you are, you think it's about you. And I could tell you countless stories. Everything that I do one-to-one is all about those kind of stories. Who put the message there? Because it isn't true. You're born with natural self-belief, but it gets chipped, that things get in the way of it, that if you can then remove, you're like, that was their fear, that was their limiting belief, that was their issue that you took on because you didn't know at that age that it was theirs, not yours. That's all what it's about.
Yeah, you get told you can't do something so many times until you start to believe it.
Until you can meet me, and then I'm like, let's get rid of all those invisible layers. Come on. Where's that person inside that just wants to shine?
So you mentioned empathy then as an important aspect of a speaker. I've done a personality profile, and I quite famously have, it's either 1% or 0% empathy, which I was quite proud of, and apparently I shouldn't be. I think it makes me borderline sociopath. But do you need empathy as a speaker? Do you need empathy? Is that an important thing? Do we have to have this, really? Where can I buy some?
Yeah. Well, there's two answers that are coming to mind in that. Firstly, I hope the message there of the 7 strengths is that's the kind of speaker I am. Point is, I believe everyone can be an effective speaker, but you play to your, whatever you bring means that it's a bit like when, there were very different varieties of doctors, teachers, engineers. If we bring who we are to the job that we do, that's our way of doing that job. So that's all I'm saying, that I'm, an empathetic speaker, but it doesn't mean someone else will be more detailed, strategic, decisive, whatever. And then the second part, I use a tool called Strength Scope, and I have a creative strength, so I may be a little bit rogue here. But in my opinion, they have 24 strengths within this test. And in my opinion, we do actually all have them. So yes, empathy might be naturally low, but it could just be that it hasn't been fostered particularly or developed. I would say that, if you really didn't have any empathy, that would be kind of psychopathic, narcissist, which I don't know. I know that you're not. So I think you have more than maybe you think you do.
Well, the test was 1 or 0%.
Really?
Yeah. My eldest son actually said that I was a narcissist last weekend. But in an endearing way. And he's been properly analysing it. He said, yeah, you definitely a narcissist. And then he explained how I bring everything back to me, which I've just done now. So, yeah, maybe he has a point.
Maybe.
But yeah. Just enough of that. Let's not deal with Robbie's diagnosis of me. We don't need to know about that. So, what kind of things do you think people need to do to successfully deliver a talk? What kind of tips would you be giving people? Because obviously you gave me some.
Yes, I did. And the first one I think I gave you was, never start with my name is. Start with something engaging, with a question, so I always try and start what of mine is, I think, as I did today, kind of think of a time that you held yourself back, think of a time that someone else was getting in their own way. It's asking the audience to do something straight away or something that surprises them. So I love telling the story of a chap I met networking, who I'll meet lots of financial advisors networking, but he just nailed it. It was his first networking outing from what I understood afterwards. But he just began by kind of going, have you ever, met someone who was so miserable in their job and they thought that they had to stay in it when actually they could retire, but they didn't realize it because of their finances. And we were kind of like, oh, what? And he said, well, I want to tell you about why I'm a financial advisor. And he just went and told this whole story that was sort of heartbreaking about this poor chap that thought he had to stay in this job and ended up handing his notice in the next day based on the financial assessment that this chap had done. And so he was a perfect example. He was chatting to me afterwards and said, well, I don't know if I like networking, was I all right? And I was like, God, Dave, you nailed it. Like, I don't remember any of the financial advisors that I've ever met. No disrespect to anyone listening, but because they would have said, my name's so-and-so, and I'm a financial advisor, and I work for this firm, and we specialize in this and this, or I've been doing it for X amount of years. And you're like, God, I won't remember any of that. But I've never forgotten this chap that told us about why he cared and a story, and he had me right from the beginning. So that would be my always first tip. And then another tip is to take people with you. So they need to sort of feel that emotion of really the pain of the kind of like, and then have a bit of the epiphany, the light bulb moment. So a bit like the story I told there of, Graham was that light bulb moment when he listened to what I'd said and looked at the strengths and went, you already have within you, there's your 5% genius, light bulb goes on. You want people to have that kind of experience when they're listening, hanging on, like, what happened next? So I help people to find that, because we all have them, but sometimes we don't know which, how to match that story to the message that we want to deliver. That can be quite tricky, but we can find them.
You mentioned networking right at the start of that, and I go to a lot of networking events, as you know, and that so many people stand up and start with, hi, my name's Darren, and my company's called Engage Web, and we build websites, and blah, 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 blah. And then the next person do the same thing, and then the next person and the next person. They're taught to do that. This is the structure. You say your name, you say your company, what you do, and then you finish with your name. Nobody cares. Nobody's interested. But if, as you say, if you stand up and you grab somebody with something that's different, something that breaks the norm, something that's interesting or shocking or something they just didn't know, it gets their attention immediately. You don't need to be the templated, because it just fits in with everything else. People don't remember what you say, but they remember how they feel.
Exactly. And another lovely example, I was at a ladies' lunch the other week, and Lynn from Limani Travel, with a little plug, she stood up and she said, when I was 10, I went with my granddad to a travel agent, and he kind of left me there for a bit. He was doing his thing, and I was under a table or something, flicking through all these magazines, and I was seeing, all of these destinations, and just, and I couldn't believe it. 10 years old, it was like the best books I'd ever found, the pictures and these words. I'd never heard of Jamaica, and I'd never heard of, St. Kitts or whatever. And of course, she went on to tell the rest of her story, and she's been a travel agent, kind of since that day. As a 10-year-old, she just was lit up like a Christmas tree, going, look at this. And what a lovely thing to understand, that she could have stood up and said, I'm Lynn, and I will book your travel needs, and I know this, and I've been here, and I'll save you money, and all the rest. And we wouldn't have known why she cares. We wouldn't have known anything about 10-year-old Lynn that went, I need to stay in this place and look at me and do this, because imagine if I could do this every day. Yes, and she nailed it, absolutely nailed it.
What, I actually get annoyed when I go to networking events and every person, one after the other, does the same sort of templated response. And then one person stands out by doing something different. Why do you suppose it is that everybody just does that and doesn't engage people, doesn't tell stories?
I think the word is spreading, isn't it? But it's just, I don't know. It's interesting. You go to, I suppose, what you've seen. One of the rules of the mind is the mind likes what's familiar, and it struggles with what's unfamiliar. So even though I've been saying kind of a lot in this chat, it's actually very familiar to tell stories. But somehow I think something happens between, I tell a story about me and a lady at a bus stop, and I like to kind of tell that story because you and I now kind of over a coffee, and then so the person that you might speak to at the table at the networking over the coffee, or while you're helping yourself to a drink, is a very different person than then suddenly, oh, here's your 2 minutes to speak to the room. And it's like a different person stands up. Hello, my name is. And you think, I just chatted to that person during the coffee. What? They've morphed into some sort of boring version of themselves. So that's really my message, is when you tell a story as if you're just chatting, to a friend, that's your most engaging version of you. So try and bring that person into the, but we somehow don't. It gets lost between, I think it's this, again, these beliefs, well, I need to appear professional and, I shouldn't let my true self show. I've got to be, and it isn't true.
I think that's why I do this podcast the way I do it, rather than have set questions, because quite a few people have asked to send questions to them because they like to be prepared and have answers. But I genuinely don't have any questions, so I don't do that. And I've listened to a lot of podcasts where they have a very strict format. And like the first part before the break will be, let's talk about your childhood. And then it'll be, let's talk about your business. And then let's talk about your music. And it is very, very rigid. And you can tell it's not natural. It's a little bit forced. Yeah. Whereas just having a meandering conversation comes out with stuff that you...
Things out of me today that I would not have planned to say. And that's the point, though, isn't it?
It's the point.
Absolutely. There's things that I've just said today because they're the truth. But if you'd asked me to script it, no way would I be telling you all this stuff. So well done.
Thank you, I think.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. So what kind of businesses do you or people do you work with? Do you help?
I have kind of 5 key aspects. So I have 5 pillars, really, of confidence.
5 pillars of confidence.
Yeah, and they spell the word build. So B is be self-aware. So some people might bring me in to understand sort of lack of motivation, maybe in the workplace. It might be mental health. So, and it could be on a sort of small group level that we know there's people that are feeling very anxious. They've just up leveled, maybe promoted, and they do have self-limiting beliefs, or they've got imposter syndrome. That would be sort of the be self-aware. As I said, our decisions come down to love or fear, so unless we're aware of our fears and limiting beliefs, we can't really overcome them. So that would be about that. Then the U is about utilize your strengths. So I might go in and that would be more about the strength psychology. Let's find everybody's 5% genius, because that impacts communication, relationships, motivation. It really kind of lifts everyone. And they may not want the kind of deeper stuff. They might just want, the more motivational strength. So that could be a keynote speech, or it could be a workshop. Sometimes I get asked for the I, which is I'm okay, you're okay. I'm a relationship therapist. That's after physiotherapy. My first journey into the therapy world was the British Army paid for me to qualify through the charity Relate to support relationships. So I'm very, I think mental health, everything we can talk about is fine if we're individuals, almost in a bubble. But as soon as you bring relationships into it, everything can, what about the colleagues? What about your family? So that's about relationships. The L is called Lead Your Mind. So I might get brought in to talk about mindset, and that's about, we have a very powerful subconscious mind. We have 70,000 thoughts a day. 95% of them are subconscious. Most of those are negative. And when I told you the story about Eddie Izzard, that I now know the science behind that. He was talking about overcoming his mind monkeys. Well, the way I term it is, if you think of the powerful subconscious mind as like a stallion, when it's triggered, it will be stronger than the horse rider. It will take over and it will just be led by fear. But you can learn to be like the horse rider of your own subconscious mind. You can say, that I'm not my past. I am my future, and you follow my instructions and not the other way around. That's lead your mind, or it will lead you. And then the D, I'm getting asked more and more to talk about develop your voice. So that's the D, which is, whether you're a salesperson, whether you're a marketer, like whether you're gone up leveled and you're going for a job interview or a promotion, or you've become into a management role, how you use your voice, how you tell your stories. We're all public speaking all the time, whether that's on the phone, whether that's just to a couple of colleagues, whether it's giving a presentation, whether it is going for interviews or promotions. How do you tell your story so that people understand what you're energized by, who you are? And then it goes into that like, know, and trust kind of thing. But that's really about developing your voice. So overcoming a fear of public speaking and understanding how to tell your story. So those are the 5, BUILD.
Become the horse rider of your unconscious mind, or it will flee like a stallion.
Absolutely.
Do you say that normally, or is that the first time you come up with that?
No, I use that with every client.
Do you use that?
Yeah. Some obviously understand it more than others, but if you've ever been on a horse or ever if you get that, they're like, yeah. And the reason that is so impactful is because I say the same horse, you can see one just going crazy, and then a different rider could get on the same horse and you'd be going, it's like a different animal. How have you done that? Instantly, the horse just feels that they trust that rider, they know what they're doing. That's how the clients I work with one-to-one with, that's the transformation they have. That's why it's called rapid transformational therapy. Because if you understand the fears that your own mind has picked up, coming back to what we've said, you go back to key moments. What was that art teacher saying to you? How did it make you feel? What belief did that install? Now let's go even younger. Maybe when was the first time you started to feel not good enough, different, rejected? These are the things that our subconscious is protecting us from. We only arrive on the planet with 2 innate fears, 2 reflexes: fear of loud noises, fear of falling. We have a startle reflex. We have a reflex that turns our head to noise as a tiny baby. That's it. Everything else is learnt. So everything else is into this subconscious mind, but we're not our past. But that past subconscious programming will take over like a stallion unless we learn to be the horse rider and go, I get it, but I'm in charge now and we're going this way. I'm not going to let you lead me anymore. I'm leading you.
And that's the power of storytelling, what you've done there. You've painted a picture now of 70,000 thoughts a day, did you say?
Yes.
Most of them negative.
Some negative.
And that's your stallion running away unless you tame it and take control of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's incredible, the shifts of understanding, it can have understanding is power. Once you understand, like, oh gosh. So that, and I always say to people, this isn't you. This is your stallion trying to protect you, but the real you is underneath. And that's why I said at the beginning, if we go back to a happy memory first, when you didn't have any of this, and sometimes people don't have that. Sometimes they actually don't have that, which is where the strength psychology come in. It's like, well, I know that you arrived 5% genius, because every baby arrives with everything they need within them. We are the survivors of like 8,000 generations or something like that. There's no way that you're not good enough. You're the survivor of the survivor of the survivor. Like, if you don't have what it takes to succeed on this planet, who does? And that's when I just chip away at that story that they've been telling themselves. Because it could be, I've heard heartbreaking ones, if you're adopted at birth, that belief, I had a chat about 6 months ago. Well, what belief did you come up with as a baby then, as you're recognizing it now? I'm not wanted. I'm given away. Not everyone would maybe come up that would believe. They may see it differently, but that's what he experienced that as. If my own mother doesn't want me, the world doesn't want me, and I'm not enough. Or maybe you're told, I should have been a boy and I'm a girl, or I should have been a girl and I'm a boy. So from the very beginning, this message goes in: not wanted, not good enough.
Wow.
Big stuff.
Yeah, that's a lot deeper than I was expecting today.
Sorry, that's my job. There you go. See your empathy. You wouldn't be able to have this conversation. You have empathy. I've have a chat with your son. I'm sure you have it.
Oh, he wasn't questioning the empathy. He was questioning the. I forgot the word again. What did he say? Narcissist. That was the one. I specialise in those. So honestly, if anyone's listening, a lot of my clients have narcissists in their lives because it really does have that impact on am I good enough? So, but I'm not seeing one here and now. Well, speak to Robbie. He seems to think I am, but in a good way. He's fine with it. But there we are. He surrounds himself with narcissists. I don't know why. Very, very strange lad, Robbie. Very strange lad. But there we go. So you're helping people with your build mechanism. What ways do you work with them? Is this an online thing? Is this a face-to-face thing, or a one-to-one?
Well, as you kind of heard, I do love the performance. So I do love the kind of the big stage. That's what I'm visualizing for myself. The mind works in pictures and words. So my choice would be to be live and, to a room of people. And just because lovely energy of that. However, I equally love being on webinars. So sometimes I'm asked, I'll be working, I'm still a military wife. I'll be working over the next year with Recruit for Spouses. And that will be the build program. And that's all going to be webinars of supporting fellow military spouses in their businesses. I do quite a lot of work with Small Business Britain. That's all webinar based. So a combination, live and virtual.
And you said you like webinars. I mean, I've done quite a few webinars, and I personally don't like it because you don't get that engagement, you don't get that reaction with the audience, because a lot of the time you can't see them. Mm-hmm. Unless it's done over a Zoom environment where you can see them, assuming they put their camera on, assuming they're looking at it. How does it compare between being on a stage and delivering a talk to a room full of 30, 40, 50 people, as opposed to being on a webinar where you can't see anybody?
Yes, don't get me wrong, it is different, but there's an excellent speaker called Doug Stevenson. He has a really good podcast, and I think it was something he said. He basically said, you need to go inside. Your performance is actually, your job is to focus entirely on you. And that isn't a narcissistic way. It's actually like the opposite. You're not there dependent on the reaction you get. Of course, you're there to serve your audience. You're there to give, it's about them. But your performance is about you. You cannot control their reaction. You can't control, because I know I've listened to you as a great comedian. I've listened to your episodes, and that is about obviously getting the laughs. So I can understand how, from a comedian perspective, if you don't get the laughs, you haven't done your job. But more in a speaking perspective, your job is to do your job, and almost regardless of the reaction, you do your job anyway, to the best of your ability. Does that kind of make sense? So the way I view that is, I want the interaction, obviously, but that will come if I do my job well. And if I am on a webinar, I have to sort of disengage from, because I can't see the reaction, I have to not be affected by it and just do my job.
I think it comes down to the fact that when I'm speaking, I need the reaction. I need the energy of other people. I can't do it on my own.
Exactly. And I think that's the difference. And that will be, say we were working together, I work with people in different ways and that's a really interesting thing you've learned, because you'd be that type of speaker. My guess would be if you're very relationally driven, that's great, because you've learned about yourself and go, I'm the best kind of speaker I can be when the interaction is there. So yeah, I'm absolutely not saying webinars are for everyone, but I think I don't want to shut that down and say I don't do webinars, because I hope I can still use my strengths of enthusiasm, empathy, compassion. I can do that, and I don't have to have the interaction, because I take that energy within in that situation.
Is that the difference between introvert and extrovert? An introvert takes their energy from within, an extrovert takes their energy from without, or have I simplified that too much?
Possibly, and that within the test I use, people can be very extroverted or introverted, and I am a combination of the two. So you're absolutely bang on there. Potentially, I go into my more introverted space if I can't get the energy. But yes, with a live audience, I would feed off them and take some of their energy, but I don't have to have it. I can go inwards or externally. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that before.
I need it.
Yeah, and that would come out in your sort of profile. That's one of the things I do with people. That's why I use nature and nurture together. The nature is your natural strengths that are innate, and the nurture are those beliefs. Again, coming back to what we've talked about, what can we set yourself free from that isn't yours? That's been given to you by other people. Let's get rid of that. Play to your strengths, release your natural confidence, and there's you at your best. And I call that 5% genius. There you are. Play to that, and absolutely do what energizes you the most, because you'll do it to the best of your ability. Yeah.
Right. Do you know we're out of time?
Oh,
we're out of time. So before we wrap up, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, to work with you with your build mechanism, or to use you, or to hire you for a speaking gig, what is the best way for them to reach out?
Probably just via my website, cat-williams.com, on LinkedIn, Cat Williams, on Instagram @catstaycalm. They would be the easiest ways to find me, I would say.
Okay. And I will put links to all of those below the podcast. So if you're watching on YouTube, it'll be in the description. If you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, it'll be below the podcast, including the link to the TEDx talk, Cath. That will be there.
Thank you, Darren. Proudly own that.
Own it.
Everyone's heard my limiting thoughts on that one.
I mean, you brought a toilet onto the stage. It's going to live forever.
It is. No one else is ever going to do that, I don't think. I'm happy to be proved wrong, but I think I'll be the only one with a toilet on the TEDx stage.
If they do, it's just copying you. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So thank you very much for joining me. I've really enjoyed this one. Thanks.
You're very welcome.